The story is about a young guy who wins a competition to spend a week with the CEO of a very large internet search engine company. He's expecting that he's going to spend a week kind of hanging out and bonding, and maybe there'll be a promotion at the end of it if he plays his cards right. But he discovers he's actually there to take part in an experiment to test for artificial intelligence in a computer.
Caleb, you are dead center of the greatest scientific event in the history of man.
Hello.
Hi.
Her name is Ava, and she is the most extraordinary thing that's ever been invented.
How do you feel about her?
She's fascinating. When you talk to her, you're just through the looking glass.
Caleb just gets plopped into the middle of the singularity, which is the greatest scientific event of all time, and he's right at the center of it.
If you've created a conscious machine, it's not the history of man. That's the history of gods.
If you have created a consciousness in the body of a machine, that machine starts having the same kinds of rights that we do. For example, if you're imprisoning the machine and the machine doesn't want to be imprisoned, then suddenly it turns into an ethical question.
What will happen to me if I fail your test?
It's not up to me.
Why is it up to anyone?
Alex is a very intelligent and smart scriptwriter. All the time you question, you never know what's wrong or right, and you question the people around you.
What were you doing with Ava?
It really dives into what it means to be a human, what it means to think, and what it means to have consciousness, and how can you ever tell what the person in front of you is actually thinking, or if they think the same way that you do.
One day the AIs are going to look back on us the same way we look at fossil skeletons in the plains of Africa.
As Homo sapiens, we don't feel particularly bad about Neanderthal man or Australopithecus, which we replaced. If they're better than us, they're smarter and they live longer, who are we to say we're going to switch you all off?
Are you ever going to let me out?
Caleb Smith.
It's good to meet you, Nathan.
It's good to meet you too, Caleb.
The story is about three people in the house, pitting their brains against each other, trying to test each other and defeat each other mentally and form allegiances.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Caleb is a smart young guy. He understands computers, he's ambitious, he's got a whole kind of future ahead of him, but he's a decent young guy. Nathan is the opposite.
I want to talk to you about what I'm researching. In fact, I want to share it with you so much it's eating me up inside.
He's quite an intense guy. He's friendly, but there's a steeliness to him which is a little bit off-putting, and he's just a total alpha. I mean, he's as alpha as it gets.
I think he's given up on humanity to a certain extent, and he's interested in the next evolution. Although he feels compelled to do that, I think he realizes that once he succeeds, it spells the beginning of the end.
Do you want to be my friend?
Of course.
She is more than human, a bit off and strange and a bit unknowing too, but she's a bit doe-eyed sometimes because she's new to this world.
Caleb, are you a good person?
There's kind of Caleb in the middle, veering to Nathan and then veering to Ava, and it's like, who do you believe, who do you trust? And so you have to have three strong points to the triangle.
The thing about Oscar is that he just completely inhabits characters.
This guy is unbeatable, and I think it's important. I spent a lot of time trying to get that physical aspect down.
I'd worked with Alicia before, really enjoyed it. She's so kind of generous.
I have my scenes with him and almost only him throughout the entire film. It is really a lot about chemistry between those two.
I want to be with you. Do you want to be with me?
Donal has a very, very strong challenge because you are the eyes of the audience. All this stuff is coming to him. He's in something, he doesn't know what he's in, and slowly he's realizing, but even what he thinks is happening isn't exactly what's happening either. It's a very difficult role to pull off, and I think he's just done such an incredible job.
If you get these incredibly talented, very interesting people in these roles and step back, they just elevate everything. It's terrific to see that. It's terrific to observe it. Such a jump from sitting alone in a room with a bit of paper to seeing a kind of breathing world.
Can we talk about the lies you've been spinning me?
Caleb, you have to help me.
How long until we get to his estate? We've been flying over his estate for the past 2 hours.
It's a tricky locations and production design problem, which is you're making a low-budget film, but you've got to have the house of the richest guy in the world. How do you do that? We knew that if we found a really spectacular landscape and put a building inside it, the landscape would provide a lot of the power of the guy.
The landscape and the feel of the place is just so extraordinary. And we soon settled upon Norway. It's incredible, these vertical hills, these waterfalls everywhere, these deep, deep fjords, sea locks.
The notion of somebody owning this, I think sums the guy up. So Nathan owns that mountain, and he owns that river, and everything we're walking on belongs to nobody except for him, and I think that's the kind of guy he is.
Caleb, this building isn't a house. It's a research facility.
Cozy, right?
We definitely went away from cold blue light sci-fi, hard white plastics and blue lights and stuff, and towards a warmer kind of sci-fi.
We wanted to play with and balance out man-made materials with organic and natural materials right the way through. We've balanced out, you know, the concrete and the glass and the technological aspect with the fact that he's set in this really beautiful landscape and environment. And in a sense that mirrors what's happening with the characters as well.
I'm wondering if you're watching me on the cameras, and I hope you are.
Ava's space is an observation room. When we first looked at the idea of a cube within a room, we would imagine that we would put Ava within the cube and we would be outside it looking in, but we swapped that around. So in fact, Caleb, who's the observer, sits in this cube, and Ava, who's the observed, is able to roam around 270.
It's a good example of how production design feeds into a story, because then when Ava walks around, rather than feeling like she's got a lot of space, she's more like a tiger in a zoo, walking backwards and forwards over the same spot, and you think she shouldn't be here, she should actually be elsewhere. And the fact that Caleb is in this little box but then can just walk out and be in this huge landscape, it's typical of the way the people involved in making this film elevated it beyond the script that I gave them and turned it into something bigger and more interesting.
Did you know that I was brought here to test you?
What will happen to me if I fail your test?
You are dead center of the greatest scientific event in the history of man.
Hello?
I needed to house Ava in something that people could fall in love with, really.
Are you attracted to me?
The film, as far as the robot is concerned, would fail if you had a character who did not visually seem plausible as well as emotionally seeming plausible.
The first person I started working with outside of the producing team on this movie was Jock, a British comic book artist. Andrew Whitehurst took on the task of creating her and also continued with the design process as well.
The only rules that I put on the crew is you're not allowed to look at pictures of robots. So we had a whole load of reference imagery of things like Formula One suspension, high-end concept bicycles, hundreds and hundreds of images of those sorts of things.
The breakthrough for us was an idea of a mesh that covered her form. If you imagined it as a spider web, where in certain lighting conditions you can see straight through it, but in other lighting conditions the light will catch it, like a spider web, say, if you shine a light on it at night time. And so you get this sort of sense of a girl flickering in your periphery vision.
The suit that she wears was really complex to make. It's almost like you're creating something that needs to disappear into someone's body instead of stand away and look like it's doing a job as an item of clothing. So we approached it from a fabric point of view. We played with various different chemicals that we could put onto it and into it to give it a feeling that it was actually a metal and that was stiff when stretched around the body.
How do I look?
You look good.
I did my first camera test. The VFX guys came in and they took one of those frames from that test shot and showed me what it's gonna look like. And I've carried that photo with me every day on set. It's a piece of art that they've created. She's extremely exquisite and beautiful.
You can design something that, in a still, looks great. You can make it move around. It doesn't have life to it. The first time Alicia was in the costume that Samir designed, and it's like, yeah, okay, this is going to work. I get it. You can just see it there and then.
Alicia Vikander was perfect, aside from being a really incredibly gifted actress. She was trained as a ballerina. She's got an extremely good control over her physicality. The way she walks, moves her hand, a slight tilt of her head, and all of that in constructing a machine that you were seduced by was what we needed.
They did stellar work, and I'm astonishingly proud of what they achieved. When I watched the film, after the first scene, I forget that it's a visual effect, and I'm just watching her as a character. If I lose that when I watch it, then something fantastic has happened.
How do you feel about her?
She's amazing.
Do you know what the Turing test is?
Yeah. I know what the Turing test is.
The Turing test is where a human interacts with a computer, and if the human doesn't know that it's a computer they're interacting with, if they almost mistake it for being human, then the test is passed. And this Turing test is a real thing, and it's never ever been passed.
Hello, Caleb.
What would you like to have a conversation about?
Why don't we start with you telling me something about yourself?
Alan Turing understood that at some point the machines they were working on could become thinking machines as opposed to just calculating machines. He saw that it would be difficult to know whether something was really thinking or just pretending to be thinking.
Testing Ava through conversation is kind of a closed loop, like testing a chess computer by only playing chess. That won't tell you if it knows that it's playing chess, and it won't tell you if it knows what chess is.
Power cut. Backup power activated.
Caleb's central problem is he has to try and find out if this machine that says I'm trapped, help me, is feeling trapped or doesn't feel anything at all and is just going through a bunch of recorded lines.
How do you know if a machine is expressing a real emotion or just simulating one?
The idea itself is so fascinating. You never know how it's registering inside her mind. She looks like a duck, smells like a duck, quacks like a duck. But is she actually a duck? Is she perceiving things the way that we do?
Nathan isn't your friend. You shouldn't trust anything he says.